Now let's continue on and look at some other elements of democratic equality. The fifth element has to do with what we think of as perhaps the core element of democracy, particularly electoral democracy. How competitive is the system by which rulers are chosen and offices are filled? If elections are to be meaningful, they have to, in the contemporary era, involve competition of an organized nature between different political parties. So this implies at least two political parties with significant representation in parliament and a meaningful chance to win elections. It implies that there has to be something significant in the representation of opposition parties. You can't have 75 or 80% of the seats in parliament held by one party and have that be a seriously competitive political situation. Something is wrong on the face of it with a political system where any one party is that dominant. It implies low barriers to entry into the political arena of new political parties, so you can get change and ferment over time. It implies, in a truly competitive system, fairness in the drawing of electoral district boundaries, if there are electoral districts, and not the kind of gerrymandering that emerged in the 19th century in Britain or in the United States, where still to this day, many states in the United States have their electoral district boundaries drawn by political parties in control of the state legislature or the state government seeking to give themselves advantage. In a truly high-quality democracy, these functions are performed neutrally by nonpartisan, professional electoral administration or constituency delimitation bodies. A truly competitive system will ensure that different political parties and candidates have some open and fair access to the mass media. That there's a limit on the ability of an incumbent government to use the resources of government to win re-election. Now, a president may need to travel in the secure airplane or limousine that is provided for his or her protection. But you can't simply use all of the government resources and transportation facilities for your party, or the ability of a ruling party to command the airwaves as government and not provide some balance for opposition parties without losing an important element of competitiveness. Competitive, free, and fair election will squeeze out, rule out, and punish vote buying or other electoral fraud, and ensure that people are freely able to cast their vote without fear, corrupt inducement, or intimidation. It's very important, therefore, that there be a reasonably level playing field in access to the mass media, to television and radio airtime, and in funding of parties and campaigns. And generally, I have a view that public funding of political parties and campaigns has at least some role to play in ensuring a high degree of fairness and competitiveness in the electoral sense of democracy, at least to put a floor under alternative candidates so that political parties that have shown that they have some base of support in the country can have access to some public resources to be able to wage a reasonably credible and fair electoral campaign. In some countries, this means not only a minimal floor, but a maximal ceiling on what parties and candidates can spend in elections. The problem with ceilings on campaign expenditures is that they're so frequently violated and so difficult to truly assess, and enforce. And the worst thing a democracy can do is pass a law that it doesn't intend to enforce. It's much better to have limited laws and enforce them vigorously than far-reaching laws that are not taken seriously and enforced rigorously. A high quality of democracy involves pluralism and, in a way, competition and diversity, not only in politics, but in civil society and in the terrain of interest groups of vying for preferences, policies, and benefits for their respective constituencies. So we find a civil society that's a terrain of numerous NGOs and interest groups representing a broad range of constituencies and values in society. A vigorous civil society involves not just interest groups lobbying for specific benefits, but non-governmental organizations and think tanks that are trying to raise the quality of the public space more generally, improve the political process, improve the functioning and quality of democracy and of governance by lobbying for political reform, by monitoring what different agencies of government and political parties and legislatures are doing, and by exposing wrongdoing, abuses of power, abuses of government funding, and so on. It is vital in a high-quality democracy that the public have access to alternative sources of information. This means a diverse mass media with multiple sources of ownership, with access to many points of view, and that is independent of government control, even if there is, like in Britain with the British Broadcasting Corporation, a mass media agency that has public support. It's important then that that body, like the Public Broadcasting Corporation in the United States, be independent of government control, be neutral. Government ownership and regulation of the mass media should be very sparing in a liberal democracy, very limited. The media should be diverse, with a multiplicity of views, pluralistic, and predominantly private. What is vertical accountability? Well, we have different dimensions by which the public hold their agents, the elected officials, accountable. Some of these are electoral in nature. Electoral accountability is the most obvious instrument of vertical accountability. Through elections at different levels, the people or different elements of society can compete for the attention of their public office holders, compete for policies, and hold their elective office holders accountable, including by removing them for bad performance, for self-seeking behavior, for the exercise of or vulnerability to special interest group lobbying, or by a lack of attention to the public good or the interests of constituencies that want more influence and attention. But electoral accountability is not the only way in which society can hold its agents, public officials, accountable. There are other elements of what we call societal accountability that involve NGOs and interest groups lobbying, both with specific messaging to members of the parliament, public appeals, monitoring of what government does, activity, advocacy, reporting in the mass media, and generally a public that is vigilant and mobilized to pay attention to what government does and expose wrongdoing through traditional media, through new social media, through the blogosphere and individual reporting, photojournalism, evidence of corruption and malfeasance in office or of apathy by public official. All of these have a role to play in the new generation of societal accountability, which often takes, in the era we live in, a digital form.